What's happening, everyone, and welcome back to the Pathways to Success podcast. On the show today, I have Tracy Timm, and she is a career strategist and human capital advisor. Her program, the Nth Degree Academy, helps high-potential professionals discover their career sweet spot through a mix of self-discovery, tactical training, and some much-needed tough love. She is the author of the newly released book, Unstoppable, which helps you discover your true value, define your genius zone, and drive your dream career. Unstoppable is now available on Amazon. Tracy Timm, welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you?
I'm so great. This has been such a long time coming for you and I, and so this is going to be a lot of fun.
Literally, I think maybe it was 2017. It was Donnie Bovine.
Yes, it was.
Who introduced us.
Yes.
2 years later, and also a pandemic, you're finally on the show. So thanks for being here.
I'm so excited. Like I said, it's a dream and long overdue. So let's do it.
Catch us up. How are things in the world of Tracy Timm?
They're crazy. So
Yep.
Literally a week ago, if we're in real time, I published a book, my very first book, and it's a roller coaster of emotions and highs and lows, and this is going great, and is anyone going to buy it except my mom? And so things are really good. We've got a great team and a great PR firm that we're working with, and so it really feels like we're just churning right along, which is really nice considering
Awesome.
Everything going on in the world. So.
Well, I can't wait to learn more about the book, and we will definitely talk about Unstoppable. So I love unpacking sort of the genesis story. Like, how did people sort of become who they are? So I know that you've had quite the journey. So where did this start? When you introduce yourself to an audience for the first time, how do you say Tracy became?
Yes, right. So
Yeah.
if you look at, I would say, sort of traditional career coaching or clarity experts or whatever, you might imagine somebody who's had a 20, 30, 40-year illustrious career and is looking back and giving all of their amazing advice on here's how I achieved success and here's how I did everything right. And I'm the exact opposite of that. So my whole platform from day one was, hey, if career clarity is the mental equivalent of you and I trying to get through a dark room that's littered with furniture and stuff on the floor, I've already gone through that room, and I've stumbled and I've fallen and I stubbed my toe and I kicked my shin and I got to the other side of the room, and now I was awarded a flashlight. And so I'll help you look back in that room and navigate it, more readily, more easily, more effectively and efficiently. And so basically my whole platform is that I sort of screwed everything up in career, meaning I had no clarity and I made fear-based decisions, and then I quit everything and blew up my life, and just always had the faith and the belief that I could find something that I loved and something that could pay me well at the same time, and something that I was good at and something that the world needed, so it had impact and it felt meaningful. I wanted all the things, right?
Yeah.
And I found my way there. It was just messy. But then when I looked back, I was like, oh, this could be the thing that I help other people do. This is my sort of hero's journey, and so let me take somebody else on it.
Yeah.
And as many entrepreneurs do, you solve a problem for yourself, and then you find a way to solve it for other people. And so that's exactly. I mean, it's such a long and messy story. It's a great story because it takes me from this overachieving little kid to going to Yale of all places, to studying psychology, which I love, but then winding up on Wall Street because that's what everybody else was doing, all the way through many sort of iterations of screw ups after that, only to find myself finally embracing who I really was, seeing how that was valuable in certain environments, even if it was not so valuable in other environments, and really embracing that value and those strengths and putting myself in a place where I was more readily able to succeed instead of having to work my tail off all the time to achieve some marginal level of unsustainable success. So yeah, we could dive into any part of it if you want to, but it's quite a fun little tale, and it's still evolving, which is great.
Yeah. So how would you label sort of the corporate career? You did what in the corporate world before you started to feel that longing, like there is something more than this?
Oh, that probably took like 2 days, if I'm really honest. So, so I was about to graduate from Yale with a psychology degree, and I knew that I loved what I was studying. I just had no idea how to translate that into a professional, everyday working environment.
Okay.
Because I had worked since I was 15, but every job that I had never felt sustainable. It felt like, oh, I could really hustle hard and do this for a few weeks or a few months, but could I really see myself doing this day in, day out, week after week for a lifetime? And the answer was always no. So I was coming around to the time to graduate, and Yale is great about providing work opportunities for graduates, right? And people love to recruit Ivy Leaguers. It is what it is. So our on-campus options were awesome. We had like great career fairs and info sessions and all that kind of stuff. But it seemed like everybody was gunning towards these very similar type positions. Like everybody wanted to be in finance. I want to do the, JP Morgan, investment banking, all that kind of stuff. And then everybody else who didn't want that wanted to be in consulting. And so they wanted to work for the McKinseys or the Bains or whatever of the world, where I was like, who? The what? Like, I literally never even heard of these companies, which is embarrassing maybe, but it is what it is. I was just so focused on studying something I loved and still in my mindset of trying to perform, like as a kid, get A's and get to the next level, that I didn't even think about what would be next, which sounds odd, but it's true. So anyway, what happened was I really just got wrapped up in what everybody else was doing and what was readily available to me. So I went to a career fair. I stumbled upon the Royal Bank of Scotland booth, and they were both from Scotland, and they were hiring salespeople. And I was like, this sounds fun. I've sold Cutco knives. One of my best friends just got back from a study abroad in Scotland. Like, let's try it.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds ridiculous, but that was literally what happened in my brain.
Yeah.
So I applied, got through all of the rounds of applications despite knowing next to nothing about finance. And my first job out of college was in markets, in sales and trading, on a trading floor at the Royal Bank of Scotland on the high yield and distressed credit desk. So I was buying and selling, or basically facilitating the trading, even though I wasn't the trader, of loans and bonds of companies like Toys R Us and Kodak and things that, may make it, may not make it. And that was my first foray into the corporate space. And God, I hated it. It was just, so Einstein has this great quote. You may have heard it. It's everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life feeling stupid. And so there was Tracy the fish and Wall Street the tree, thinking like, oh, if I just try harder, like if I just work harder. But then I also didn't care, like when you're working on a subject matter that just doesn't deeply get you excited, you're not curious about it, it's not intellectually stimulating to you. You then beat yourself up for not learning more and getting any better, all the while not really wanting to learn anymore or get any better, except that it would make you better at your job, right? So there's nothing in it for you. So without that motivation, it's really hard to sort of get that going unless you're just really externally motivated by money and status and things like that. And I was finding that I was up to a point, and then when I reached that point, I was like, this isn't worth it anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I mean, I was there for 2.5 years, which doesn't sound like that long, but honestly it feels as long as the last 8 years have felt in a sense, because in the last 8 years I've been really, like, since I left, which is actually I just did the math, this is crazy. So my book launched September 29th 2020. The day that I decided to quit my job was September 29th 2012. And I know this for a fact because Facebook, has a like time hop or whatever that pops up and tells you what your memories were 8 years ago. And so I was looking at it the day my book came out, and it was a picture of a friend's wedding that I was at. And it's one of my pivotal moments where I love weddings. If you know me for 5 minutes, I'm like drinks and red wine and dancing and love. Like, I love weddings. I'm a great +1 in case anybody needs a +1. So anyway, I was at this friend's wedding. They were high school friends. I hadn't seen them forever. And it was one of our first friends to really get married because we were just out of college. And I was sitting outside on the curb bawling because I knew that the next day I had to fly home, and the day after that I had to go back to the office. Oh, man. And one of my friends came out and was like, this isn't you. This isn't the person we know who like loves life and has fun and is happy and engaged and learning and, all the things that when I was at my best, this was me at my worst. And that was exactly 8 years ago to the day that my book about how to become unstoppable came out.
Unbelievable.
And it's
That's
crazy,
awesome.
Right? Like, I just wrote a blog post about this because Bill Gates says something to the effect of, we overestimate how much we can accomplish in a year or 2 years, or how much change will happen in a year or 2 years, but we underestimate what 10 years time could do, right?
Yeah.
And I really believe that now, because I look at it and I thought, oh, I'm going to blow up my whole life and everything's going to change a year from now and it's all going to be perfect. That was a huge overestimation because it took a lot longer than that. But then I totally underestimated how far I could get. Like, I have a business. I've been feeding myself successfully, running my own business for 6 years. Like, that's crazy. Wow. I have 5 people on my team who are amazing, and all of them but one are graduates of our program, which is crazy. And I wrote a book, and like, I feel like I have a leg to stand on when I talk about this stuff, and I've earned that over that period of time, but I never really If you had said it was going to take 8 years, I would have been like, oh my God, that's forever.
Yeah, right.
Because when you're 24, 8 years is a really long time. When you're 33, you're like, look what I've done in my 33 years, you know? So it's, all of that's a super long-winded way to answer your question, which was, I was literally a fish climbing a tree and realized there has to be an environment where being a fish is valuable.
Yeah. There
has to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been born a fish, you know? Like, it can't be that everywhere out there is functions the exact same way where I'm going to feel like as much of a liability as I feel here.
Yeah.
Right. And not even that, but the pendulum ought to swing the other way where I don't just feel like neutral and I can get by, but who I am is actually makes me better at this job or sets me up for success in a more accessible way. So that was the epiphany. That was 8 years ago, almost to the day.
Unbelievable. And you said that you have been feeding yourself through your business for 6 years now, right? Yeah. So I always love also the genesis of the entrepreneurial leap. So I'm curious.
Let's talk about that.
How did you get your first customer? What was that value that you offered into the marketplace?
Okay, my very first customer, her name was Sam. I sold her 5 sessions of my time for $650. I'll never forget this because I was like, please say yes. Please say yes. Is that too expensive? I don't know. And now we charge a lot more than that. But we offer so much more value than that. Like 5 hours of my time, who knows, is probably worth something. But it's just looking back is crazy because it was actually her husband, Matt, who I had worked with on the trading floor, who like almost 2.5, 3 years out had said on LinkedIn, I believe it was, like, hey, my wife's not very happy with her job and doesn't know what to do. Is that what you do? Do you fix that?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, I fix that. And so she was one of my very first clients, if not the first paying client that I had. And in a matter of 5 sessions, which took all of 5 weeks, we got her into a new job. And she was super happy. And awesome. I just remember, it's a lot more complicated than that, obviously. She went through this crazy transformation. She taught me one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned as a coach or as a career sort of strategist, which is that if you don't give yourself permission, nobody else will. Right? She was almost waiting for permission to prioritize her own life and her own career. Yeah. And it took 5 sessions for us to figure that out, you know, and now we know that that's something that we try to break early or at least reframe for people. So yeah, that was my very first paying client. And I look back and it's so fascinating because I remember sitting there like, oh, please, you know, don't say this is too much and I really want to work with you. And then I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do with her for 5 sessions, you know? Because you're at the beginning, you're just sort of building up like your secret sauce or your methodology. Like, well, how am I going to do it that other people don't? Or what's special about somebody working with me? Or my goal was never for Tracy to be sort of the keeper of the magic. It was always for me to create a system or a methodology or a strategy that was replicable that I could then teach other people how to teach and other people how to facilitate. And I could teach even people to do it for themselves so that they could sort of, as they grew and evolve as humans, they could reuse the methodology every time that something in their life changed or their values changed or external circumstances like a pandemic changes, that they could go back to the method and just say, okay, start at step 1 and let me work through it again. So I really am curious about your transformation too, because people ask me all the time, excuse me, people ask me all the time, okay, well, so do I just quit my job and go like wholesale into this? And like, well, I can't do that. And so it's just inaccessible for them. It's really black and white. For me, there was a 3-year period where the majority of my income was coming not from what I was doing that I wanted to be doing full time, but from what I was doing that was like a bridge job, an additive thing that allowed me to do the thing I really wanted to do on the side and get better at it and build my methodology and still be able to feed myself at the end of the day. So I feel like we all have these really sort of fluid transition periods. Mine lasted sort of 2 years of just trying to discover what I wanted before I really hung my shingle and actually got an LLC. And then the next 3 years were working more or less full time doing someone else's work that I actually enjoyed and I learned a lot from and was able to glean a lot of information that I used in my client work. But it took 3 years to make that transition to even go from 80-20 on their stuff to 80-20 on my stuff. Yeah. And that was 3 years ago. So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
Well, first off, I love that story because, you know, in the media, it's so glamorized to have these billion-dollar acquisitions and this and that. I like the ugly. I like the rough. I like the constant failing and then learning lessons, right? Because although I went full time into my business in 2019, it took me 10 or 12 years, right? I've done so many things just to try to make money to get financial freedom, right? Network marketing, real estate, internet business, you name it. But I really see that as the price to pay for entrepreneurship, because I was paying to, that was me practicing entrepreneurship. That was discovering my insights, learning how to take risks, willing to invest in myself, right?
Yeah.
But the craziest thing of all, which I'm curious about your methodology, is when I finally surrendered this idea of trying to make money and just pour my heart and soul into something that I just loved. Because from this podcast, this thing that you're doing right now, I became a sponsored podcaster, professionally represented actor, commercial model, signed by a speaking agency, built a consulting company, which replaced my income because of these insights I've gained for the podcast.
Wow,
right?
That's incredible.
And that's how it happened. It was very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I speak often about this idea of stewardship, which I think the pathway to success is discovering your talents and abilities, finding a way to use them, to apply them in areas of interest. And like there's this intersection, of your areas of interest, natural ability, and value creation for others. And that's where it is.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so what you're talking about is the first 3 steps in the Nth Degree process, our methodology for how to discover, and it's the tagline for the book, right? It's discover your true value. That's phase 1. Discovery, meaning we're not making any assumptions, we're just learning. And then the second phase is define your genius zone, which is taking all those discovery puzzle pieces, if you will, and putting them in a frame that represents how they all fit together, like you're saying, the intersection, the overlap. And then the last phase is, okay, well, now that you've got that vision and it's clear in your mind, you've got to go for it. Like, how are you going to drive this forward? Who are the people that you're going to leverage in your search? And how are you going to navigate properly so that you don't wind up, from the frying pan into the fire type of thing, right? So the discover phase for us is 3 component parts that are kind of analogous to what you're talking to. We call them now, nature, and nurture. So now is, who are you right now, and what do you value as a human? Like, what do you need? What do you want? What's your lifestyle? And more importantly than that even, it's what do you deeply care about? What matters to you? Is it family? Is it faith? Is it friends? Is it freedom? Is it finances? It doesn't matter what it is, but what most of us don't do, and I guarantee you if you went around this office and you asked 100 people, 99% of them wouldn't be able to tell you their top 5 core values off the top of their head. I promise. And we teach our clients to do that because if you don't know ahead of time what matters, then the emotions of the moment are always going to take over. Your ego is going to take over. Fear is going to take over. And you're going to look at your opportunities through the lens of those things and not through the lens of what you value. And that's where we get distracted. That's why we end up sort of looking at jobs for, eons and then 100%. Losing sleep and all the while going, oh, this doesn't even meet my number 1 core value. Like, it's out, So we call that our easy button for making career decisions. Because it's like, if you have them right there and you just look at objectively, does this feed even the top 5? Well, if it doesn't, then it's a non-starter. Let it go. So now is always where we start. That's crucial. That's step 1. That's values. And what that helps us figure out is what sort of value proposition you have to give from a very sort of foundational perspective, and what type of business, company, if you're an entrepreneur, what type of enterprise do you want to build from a culture perspective. That's directly related to your values. The other 2 pieces are then how do you as an individual add value, which I think you can do in only one of 2 ways. Something that comes naturally to you and something you've learned or earned. That's it. So the things that come naturally to us are our behaviors, our talents, our gifts, our personality even. And then the things that we learn over time are all of our collective experience. So it's your work experience, your education, even the things we call ninja skills in our business, which is like, what did you learn from volunteering or traveling or your hobbies or extracurriculars or that thing you got forced to do when you were 14 years old to, put it on your resume for college. And I learned I loved being around children or whatever it was, right? So we deep dive into all those areas so that you get a full and robust version, if you will, of all of the value that you have to give as a person, and in this case, as a professional. And then in the define phase, we basically, if you imagine in your mind's eye like a triple Venn diagram of now, nature, and nurture, we're just looking for the nexus. We're looking for what do you deeply value that aligns with something in your personality or your nature that aligns with something that you've then added on top of that. So let's say you really value caring for people. That's like one of your deep core values. And oh, by the way, in your personality, you actually have a sort of social personality. So you remember people's names and you make them feel welcome, and you're really good at tailoring your message to a specific individual. You just have that knack for, oh, I'm talking to Julian, this is how I modify. You know, I'm talking to Tracy, this is how I modify. And then, oh, by the way, in your nurture, you did Toastmasters and you took a class on persuasion. You read, you know, the book and you did, right? So that person may very well care for people by speaking and sharing a message. And there's so much, it's a value stack, right? Because it's like foundationally, I care about this, so nobody's going to work harder than me.
Yeah.
I'm naturally gifted at it, so nobody's going to be better at it with less effort than me. And then, oh, by the way, look at all these things I've learned and added on top of it that make me even more valuable in that area. That's the magic.
Yeah.
And you just do that for every one of your core values and overlap it with your nature and your nurture. And by the time you've gone through 7 to 10 core values, you've got a really cool, like, Olympic gold medal level athlete at something professionally, right? Like we can give it the 10 things that make up that person and the 10 things that make up that job, if you will. And then our job is just go find it in the world. Where does that exist? And like you said, it's all about who you're serving and the value that you're adding in the world, because the magic combination, if the Japanese call this ikigai, is what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for.
Yeah.
So if you can put those two things together from now nature and nurture, what you love and what you're good at, well, then the other two pieces of the puzzle are just finding what does the world need, meaning how can you apply this in a meaningful way, and then how do you monetize it? That's it. That's the last step. Because up until then, you're a volunteer. And then after that,
100%,
right, you're a professional. And not that volunteers aren't professionals, but you get what I'm saying. You're a paid version of that thing. So that's exactly how we do it. And it's fascinatingly simple in that way. It's a journey and a transformation for every person that goes through it, because it's the first time that they've ever thought of their value in that way. But if you just think about it as like a math problem, and look at it objectively and pull yourself out of the emotions of it, then by the end of that process of discovery and defining your genius zone, you look awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and you feel awesome. Like every one of our clients graduates and they start advocating for better jobs. They leapfrog jobs they've been passed over before. They have more confidence to apply for things that would have never thought that they were capable of or never thought that they had the qualifications for. But now that they've done all that research on themselves, they're like, I could totally do that, and I could do it better than the person who's already doing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a really empowering process.
You know, I love it, and I have to say, it's probably the most systematic way I've heard what we're talking about discussed, right? One of the ways that I distill truth is how many times can you see a similar idea appear within different sets of contexts. This finding this intersection thing, I've called it just on my own, discover, serve, grow, right? Ooh, and you mentioned ikigai. Yours also finds a kind of like an intersection.
Yeah.
Also in Good to Great, Jim Collins calls it the 3 circles, right? And from it comes the hedgehog concept. So it really is, it's the truth, man, but it also takes the hard work of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Which takes me to the next topic here.
Yes.
A lot of times when it comes to pursuing one's passion or doing one's great work, you are inevitably faced with self-doubt and overcoming fear.
Always, I think.
Tell us your best stuff on how to overcome this.
Okay, so I like to lean on the greats and then come up with my own sort of how all those things come together. So one of the things that I always think of immediately when people ask me about fear is, let's just go back to the psychology. We are biologically hardwired to be afraid of stuff.
Yeah.
It's kept us alive historically for millennia, right? And beyond. And I think that's something we just need to remember and put it into its own context. And the best person who's written about this, I think, is Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote in Big Magic about creativity, how fear always comes along in the process of creativity. And in order to unleash your creativity, you have to put fear back in its place. And so the first thing that we have to do is just acknowledge that fear is not going to go away. Like, because we're hardwired to be afraid of stuff that keeps us alive, like don't run into that bush of bees and like run away from that tiger. Like what she says that's just so funny is she's like, I'm just sitting down to write a poem. Like, I'm not running from a saber-toothed tiger. Like, I don't need to be afraid of this, but it makes us feel the exact same fear mechanism as though we were physically in danger, right? As though we were needing to, fight or flight. So that's the first thing that I want people to remember is like, you can't fight your fear and you certainly can't like overcome it. It's always going to be there. So our next job is to put it in its place. Well, how do we do that? I think that the best way and the most consistent way that I've ever been able to deal with my fear is with logic. So there are two ways to do this. Tim Ferriss has this great, he did a great TED Talk, that's what they're called. He did a great TED Talk called Fear Setting, where he actually comes up with the scenario in his mind that he is afraid of, writes it down, and then writes out all the possible ways that he could sort of mitigate that risk.
Wow.
Which is really interesting. So he'll say like his example in his TED Talk is he really wanted, in the midst of his very first business, to just leave. He just wanted to travel and get away from the day-to-day stuff. And so his fears were like, oh, the business is going to fail, or they're going to need me, or whatever. So he just wrote down like what I want to do. I want to leave and travel. And then he wrote down all the bad things that could happen if he did that. And then the next question was, and he got real deep and real scary. Like, I'm homeless, and like like all the worst things you can think of. And then all he did in the next column is, what's one thing I can do to keep that from happening? Is there anything that I could do ahead of time to mitigate that risk? And it was like, make sure that my family has a couch open for me so that I'm never homeless. Okay, check, right? And he just goes down the list and sort of mitigates each one of those risks. And it's actually kind of a really intellectual and objective way to look at your fears. My favorite way to do it is actually, again, going back into the psychology. When you think about in life, I learned this so after I skipped this part of my story earlier. When I quit Wall Street, I didn't just start working. I went on a semester at sea, which is an undergrad, and it sounds like you know what it is. It's an undergraduate study abroad program where you're on a boat for like 4 months, 6 months, which was just awesome. And I met some of the best mentors and life-changing experience. And one of the guys I met was a professor of social psychology, and he taught me about the psychology of regrets. And he said, basically, if you really dwindle down everything you can regret, there's only 2 categories, psychologically speaking. You can regret something that you did, and in the science or whatever it's called, those are called sins of commission, or you can regret something you didn't do, and those are called sins of omission. Okay, that's literally it. Those are the 2 things as humans that we can regret. I did this bad thing, or I just didn't do this thing at all, and I regret it. And what's fascinating is that the way that our brains are wired is that a brain needs an answer. Like, the reason that most of us experience anxiety, fear, etc., is because we don't know what's going to happen. It's from uncertainty or the lack of an end to a story. So what happens in your brain is that when you do something wrong and you regret it, that story has an end. So it may feel terrible in the moment. You may feel awful about what you did, but you get over it much more readily because there's an end to the story. You know what happened, right? There's a consequence that's obvious and clear, and then it's over. What happens when you do something that you didn't regret is not only do you not get an answer to the story, the brain has to search infinitely for a possible answer. Right? So, and guess what? There are an infinite number of possible answers. So in the absence of a clear end of the story, the brain is looking for one, which is exactly why people on their deathbed say things like, I wish I had had the courage to be myself, or I wish I hadn't worked so much, or whatever. They don't look back and say, oh, I wish I hadn't said I love you because she turned me down. They would look back and say, what if I had said I love you?
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? And it's those what ifs and coulda, woulda, shouldas and that can literally haunt you for life. And we are biologically, chemically, and psychologically hardwired for that to be true.
Yeah.
So when he just laid that out for me, that's so logical that I was like, okay, so let me break down what you're saying. You're saying that I will never regret more doing something and failing, falling on my face, having them not say I love you back, my business being home, whatever it is, right? I'll never regret that more than choosing not to do one of those things because I'm afraid of what might happen, and then looking back on it throughout my life and wondering what might have happened. And he said, absolutely right. And he ended it with this. He said, that is why it's always worth taking your meaningful shot for the stars. Period. And I was like, like, are you crazy? Like, and
it's always worth taking your meaningful shot to the stars.
Isn't that crazy? It's so good. And every single time I'm like, I immediately became that girl that like goes up to the guy in the bar and is like, hey, you're cute, because I'm like, what if it's my husband and I didn't say hi, And then I just started putting that same logic into my business. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing more vulnerable than putting a book out with your name on it. Yeah. It's like having a baby and then showing it to the whole world and going like, do you think it's pretty? Do you think it's cute? Do you want to read it? I had one person along the way, and God love him, he was like, are you kind of afraid that like no one's gonna buy it? And I'm like, yes, of course I'm afraid no one's gonna buy it. Like, that's the ultimate fear. But I never wanted that type of fear to keep me from doing it and trying, because geez Louise, like, wouldn't you rather have a book that's just like a catastrophic failure, but you did it, you wrote the book, you put it out into the world, and it's yours, and it has your name on it, and like, it doesn't matter what people think about it, you did that, you created that thing, then to look back and go, man, there's this book I always wanted to write. Like, what if I had actually sat down and written it? How would my life be different? What might have happened? Who might have read it? What impact could it have had? Like, that's terrifying to me. And I would so much rather, so when I look at fear, that's how I logically combat my fear constantly. It's like, am I afraid that no one's going to buy this thing that I put out there in a launch? 100%. Do I get really sad when no one buys it? Yes. But is that ever going to keep me from building something new and trying to sell it and seeing what happens and learning and going on to the next lesson? No, because I logically know that regret, however I feel about it, is exponentially less than what I would feel if I didn't try.
Yeah.
So that works for me.
You are absolutely speaking my language, and the truth is I am I reflect quite often, and I've never regretted anything that I've done, even if it seemed stupid in retrospect.
Yeah.
I've always regretted things I didn't do. So I totally get that. I think it's great advice. I want to close with the book, Unstoppable. Tell us what inspired this book and what will our listeners get from it?
Okay, so when I decided to start an LLC, and I honestly, I don't know who are out there listening, but like, I felt like that was my God-driven sort of thing to do. Like, I had quit my job. I had gone on semester at sea. I had come back. I thought I had a job. It fell through. I started cobbling a life together. It was miserable. I took a full-time job and got fired because I was, again, another fish in a tree scenario. And all of this to say that I kept trying to do things the traditional way, but that didn't work for me. Like, it just, I'm not built to play the game. The corporate game. I'm just not. I'm too informal. I have all these other things, whatever. And so I just remember sitting there and praying and saying, like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'll go do it. You just tell me. I just want a vision. And what was fascinating was that I had been given that vision years prior, and it was, I had sort of put it off to the side, right? And I guarantee every person listening has that thing that's been like nibbling at the back of their mind, and they're just like, no, I could never. That's for somebody else to do. And mine was that when I called up Yale Career Services, miserable at my job, and said, the only thing keeping me here is a lack of clarity as to what I really want to do. And they said, that's not really what we do, right? We don't really help with that. We can help you find another job. We can help you with your resume. We can help you interview. But like, we're not set up to give you clarity. We're set up to sort of push you towards stuff when you have clarity, if that makes sense, right?
Right, totally.
And I remember thinking, what? Like, I'm sorry, you don't have like a you can't tell me step one? Like, what is step one? There, in everything in life, especially today, if you don't know how to do it, you can look it up, right? If you and I want to bake a cake, how many recipes are online, right? If I need to jump my car, YouTube. Like, we can figure out how to do almost anything, yet there is no universal recipe for career clarity, and that pissed me off. Mm-hmm. Pissed me off, because you don't know how many people were working next to me on Wall Street who I was like, you would be God's gift to construction. You would be God's gift to art. You would be God's gift to music, and they're pounding away at these horrible jobs for what? Like, someone else's definition of success? Like you said, they're not making an impact. They're not serving, and so they're not being served. Mm-hmm. So multiple people are failing in that, right? So anyway, that was when the seed was planted. I finally decided, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try my best to figure this out, and I could fail beautifully, and that would be fine, but I'm going to give it a go. And so what happened was I spent the first 3 years in business where 80% of the time I was working with a behavioral assessment called the predictive index, and so I was implementing that in companies. I was selling it, I was servicing it, I was training it, fell in love with the assessment, learned a ton from those companies. And then on the side, I was repurposing all of that learning with my individual clients. So if I saw something that worked, like, the values proposition piece, like the now, aligning with company culture, I pulled that over to my individual clients and said, okay, let's start with your values so that at the very least we know what kind of company culture you fit into, right? And it just sort of happened piecemeal like that. Plus I was repurposing all the things that I had learned through my own, sort of stumbly black room journey into the same process with my clients. And so by the end of 3 years of doing that, this process, this pattern started to distill itself. And that's when I had these sort of 5, the process is now 7 core steps. At the time it was 5. And I was like, this is it. This is what I teach. This is the thing that we're going to take everybody through. Awesome. This is going to be our secret sauce. And I called it the Nth Degree. Every single every single step starts with the letter N. Now, nature, nurture, network, navigate. That was the original 5. Now it's now nature, nurture, niche, network, navigate, nourish. And that's what the book is about. So I solidified that at the end of 3 years. And then for the last 3 years, we've been perfecting it. Just making it to where, like you said, it's logical, it's straightforward, it's step by step. It's almost like a math problem. And once I got it to that point, I was like, this is when I'm going to write the book about it. Like we need to get it in front of more people because we have amazing programs, but they're intense. You have a coach, they're not free, and not everybody has access to that time or that money, right? So I really wanted to put something out there that could impact more people on a wider scale. And I'd always had a book in my heart. I don't know. I'd always wanted to be an author. I think there's another one bubbling up here soon too that's going to be more my own personal journey, which will be much more fun to read, I think, than like do this, do that. But the book was written for anyone who is stuck because of a lack of clarity. So maybe you're miserable at your job, right? Maybe you're not miserable, you're just not fulfilled and you don't really know why. Or maybe you've hit a ceiling where you know that you're made for more, meant for more, can do more, but you're not sure even how to advocate for yourself or what that looks like. Or anyone who is stuck because of a lack of clarity, this book will help them get to the next level, to feel unstoppable again, and to experience more clarity and more confidence and more certainty in their career.
I love it.
Yeah.
And Tracy, being a recruiter for 12 years, that's all I've done is hire and coach people. I don't think I've heard it so well articulated and logically set out as the way that you have and what you propose the book has.
Thanks.
And I 100% already endorse the book, and I'm happy to share that out.
Well,
just because I know you now.
Yeah.
So the show is called Pathways to Success.
Yes.
How do you personally define what success is?
So today is Tuesday, October 6th. And so this is my answer for today. I get asked this question a lot, actually. And I find that as much as I espouse the idea of setting your own vision for success and then not getting distracted, I get distracted easily because that's human nature, right? We sort of, as my business coach puts it, when you start out on any journey, and let's say it's an entrepreneurial journey or a journey to quote success, right? You start out as you version, let's call it sub 1, and then you have this vision of success. We're going to call it goal sub 1, right? And then as you like sort of travel towards it, you don't stay the same. You actually sort of ascend to this new version of yourself, and we'll call you version sub 2, right? And so now you're looking at your version of success, your goal, and you're going, well, it's not that anymore, right? It's goal sub 2. And honestly, if you're doing that and you're doing it with awareness, it's this constant evolution upward. So my version of success is starting to become, am I pursuing something that is in authentic alignment with who I am and the value that I have to give to the world? Am I consistently reevaluating as I become an even more evolved, aware version of myself, what that success looks like? So that may sound like a woo-woo kind of answer, and it is. But right now, my version of success, frankly, my baseline version of success is, can Tracy, feed and clothe herself and pay my employees, my contractors, on a consistent basis without too much stress or suffering, And the baseline is can I do it? What I really think success is something that you can do to a degree of excellence sustainably that adds value. So I never thought success was what I was experiencing on Wall Street, simply because I couldn't sustain it for the long haul, right? I was experiencing maybe what looked like success, but I didn't feel successful. Yeah. And I knew that it was only going to last a little bit longer, because no matter how much money was being thrown at me, I was done. I was out of juice, right? I had nothing left to give. And as my mom used to tell me, like, well, can't you just start to maybe reevaluate that that's what motivates you? And at the end of the day, I said no, because money doesn't motivate me in the same way that it would motivate somebody else. And that's okay. Money's not a bad thing. Money is a tool, and money makes decisions simpler and great. But what deeply motivated me was, does this matter? Is it meaningful? Is it serving people? Do I feel like I'm having an impact? Am I leaving a legacy? And so pursuing those things to me now is success. And if I can do it in a sustainable way where I'm building a living and a business and wealth, and every year is a little bit better than the previous year, then that's success for me right now. And the book is a huge success. Just getting that out into the world is massive. Living to fight another day, frankly, is success. and it's just so important to have at least some version of it in your mind. But then I think to be okay reevaluating it for yourself, not for other people, right? Not because Joe Blow over here sold 10,000 copies and I sold 3, and so now my book isn't successful. That's ridiculous. But if you've grown and evolved to a new version of yourself and you want to set a new vision for success, that's totally valid, I think. So I don't even know if I gave a straightforward answer, frankly, but yeah, I think success is all about sustainability. And for me, if I know that I'm pursuing something where I can say I'm leaving a legacy, I'm living my purpose, the world's going to be a better place because I existed, that's what's most important to me.
I love it. Tracy, 2 years in the making, worth every minute of it, man. I'm telling you, man, you absolutely over-delivered. Thank you so much for being on the show. Tell our listeners and our viewers how to connect with you, how to buy the book, how to support you. Tell us all that.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So the book is at unstoppablecareerbook.com. So Unstoppable is the title. It's about your career. It is a book. I tried to make that as straightforward as possible. So unstoppablecareerbook.com. You can buy it at your favorite outlet. If you buy it at Amazon, leave a review, because that helps us with the juices of Amazon. And then my website is tracytimm.com. And then our business and product page website is Nth Degree, so NTH, the word degree, .tracytimm.com. And everything lives there. We've got some amazing freebies. You can book a call directly with me, with my teammates, to learn about our programs. You can buy the book there. We've got all kinds of freebies and downloads, so that's where all the fun exists. And then just like you, my outlet is LinkedIn. I don't hang out anywhere else. I tried really hard to sort of make like Facebook and Instagram work for me, and it's just not authentic for me. I'm much more of the like, okay, if I'm going to work with professionals, I'm going to be on a professional page, and so LinkedIn is my outlet. So you can chat with me there. You can actually directly connect with me as opposed to a member of my team, and yeah, that would be the best way.
Awesome.
The best way to go about it.
Awesome. And Tracy will have all your contact information in the show notes. Everyone go get the book. I fully endorse Tracy, fully endorse the book. I think absolutely what she laid out can help every single person out there who's got that seeking and yearning in them. Yes, man. Preach. I'm so grateful for people like you and for platforms like this. And it just, my biggest goal is that, God, it doesn't sound like you've maybe ever hated your job, but man, when I was on Wall Street, I was like, please just have a solution fall into my lap. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I wanted to be that serendipitous thing. And so when I wrote the book, I was like, this could be that thing. You know, this could be the serendipitous, this came at the right time for this person thing. So I'm so grateful for people like you who are talking to people that I don't know, who would never know about the book, because man, if you're miserable and stuck because you just don't have the clarity of what you're made for, what you want to do next, what your deepest impact could be, this book works. This process works. Like we've worked hundreds of people through it. It's perfected, and I'm so proud of it. And so I'm just so grateful for you and for this, like I said, this platform to get this in front of more people, change more lives. Well, this has been amazing, and I'm so glad that we know each other now. Yay! So everyone, thank you all for tuning into another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.